Kashmir, a region beyond the mountains, located at the crossroads of South Asia, China, and Central Asia. Historically known as the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, it is now effectively divided into three parts. About 55% is controlled by India, 30% by Pakistan, and the remaining 15% by China. This is a land of natural wonders and military fortresses, home to the Himalayas and the Karakoram range, with peaks soaring above 6,000 meters and rugged valleys. But the truth hidden behind these mountains is something else entirely. Kashmir sits at the meeting point of three nuclear powers: India, Pakistan, and China. If there's anything as complex as the geography of this region, it's the geopolitical value assigned to it by these states. To the west lies the Kashmir Valley. To the east, the high-altitude, cold desert of Ladakh. Mountain ranges turn the region into a series of natural barriers. At the northernmost tip is the Siachen Glacier. Just beyond Siachen is Afghanistan's Wakhan corridor. Being at such a critical geopolitical junction makes Kashmir a stage where international crises can easily erupt. On April 22nd, a terrorist attack occurred in the Pahalgam region of Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir. Armed men opened fire on tourists, killing 26 people. Among the dead was a lieutenant from the Indian Navy. This attack reignited tensions between two countries that have long faced issues over the region, India and Pakistan. Since that day, the border has echoed with the sound of gunfire. There have been cross-border exchanges. The biggest question now is whether all this could spark a full-scale war. So, what has happened since then? What moves and statements have each side made? What has unfolded since April 26? In recent days, both sides have conducted large-scale military exercises. The Indian Navy launched a wide-ranging maritime drill. Pakistan's Air Force deployed numerous fighter jets to the border areas and installed air defense systems in the region. On the 23rd, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh declared that those responsible for such an act and those behind them would soon receive a loud and clear response. Following the latest attack, India directly blamed Pakistan. The first move was to suspend the Indus Waters Treaty signed in 1960. This treaty governed the sharing of rivers in the Indus Basin. The Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej rivers were allocated to India. Around 80% of the Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab rivers were designated for Pakistan. But this system has long been fragile. Pakistan has been concerned that India could restrict water flow by building dams, especially since its agriculture is almost entirely dependent on the Indus River. In other words, it now faces an existential threat. To give a sense of the scale, 80% of the country's agricultural water needs and roughly 1/3 of its hydroelectric power come from this basin. And now, we're seeing the consequences of suspending the treaty. On the left, a satellite image from April 26th shows the Chenab River flowing strongly through Pakistan's Sialkot region. But just 3 days later, on April 29th, that same area has almost completely dried up. The riverbed has turned grey, and farmland has been cut off from its water source. This crisis hasn't been limited to water. The Attari-Wagah border crossing was closed. The daily ceremonies performed by Indian and Pakistani soldiers, watched by thousands, were suspended. New Delhi gave Pakistan's defense attachés and military representatives 1 week to leave the country. Similarly, it recalled its own defense, air, and naval advisors from Islamabad. Pakistan responded just as forcefully to this diplomatic breakdown. On April 24th, all Pakistani citizens in India were asked to leave the country. Islamabad issued the same call for Indian citizens. Amid these escalating steps, Pakistani officials issued an even harsher warning. They declared that any attempt by India to cut off the Indus River would be considered an act of war. On April 28th, India banned numerous Pakistani YouTube channels broadcasting within its borders. This showed that digital propaganda had also become a tool of warfare. Then, on April 29th, the Pakistani military announced it had shot down an Indian drone near the Kashmir border. The drone was reportedly on a reconnaissance mission in the Bimba area and had violated the border. On the other hand, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that he had granted the military operational freedom. On April 30th, Pakistan's Minister of Information stated that India was preparing for a military strike in the near future. According to him, they had credible intelligence to back this claim. So how did other countries react? President Erdogan said they had hoped for a rapid de-escalation of tensions between Pakistan and India. US President Donald Trump, during this critical period, gave only a brief comment. They'll get it figured out one way or the other. However, US military cargo planes continued landing in India throughout this time. On the Chinese side, Foreign Minister Wang Yi called for de-escalation. Whether a war will break out remains uncertain, but tensions are extremely high. Military activity continues across the region. Kashmir is one of the most militarized zones in the world. India has deployed over 500,000 troops and paramilitary forces there, especially in the Kashmir Valley. There is a dense military network filled with bunkers, checkpoints, and garrisons. I recall a news story from 2023. India was arming Hindu civilians to build a militia network. Muslims in Kashmir feared attacks from these militias. On the Pakistani side, exact troop numbers are unclear, but it's estimated that over 100,000 troops are stationed in Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Both countries have deployed heavy artillery in Kashmir. India uses Bofors FH-77B howitzers, M7777 howitzers for mountainous terrain, and K9 Vajra self-propelled artillery in Ladakh. Additionally, 100mm field guns and 120mm mortars are also deployed. Pakistan, on the other hand, has US-made M109 self-propelled howitzers and traditional towed artillery. As a newer addition, they have acquired SH-15 truck-mounted howitzers from China. Both sides also use multiple launch rocket systems. India fields the Pinaka MBRL with a 40-kilometer range, while Pakistan has the A-100 rocket system with a range of 100 kilometers. Now let's look at whether the two armies are prepared for a potential high-intensity conflict. The Indian military has around 1,248,000 active personnel, significantly more than Pakistan's 560,000. This gap is largely due to India's much larger population base. India has a population of 1.4 billion, compared to Pakistan's 252 million. According to Global Firepower, India ranks 4th out of 145 countries in global military strength, while Pakistan ranks 12th. These rankings are based on a variety of factors, including manpower, equipment, financial resources, and logistical capacity. However, regional realities, historical conflicts, and technological developments can shift the balance over time. Both countries are nuclear powers. Recent estimates suggest that both Pakistan and India possess around 170 nuclear warheads. In terms of land power, the Indian Army operates 4,201 tanks and 148,594 armored vehicles. Pakistan, in comparison, has 2,627 tanks and 1,716 armored vehicles. But Pakistan holds some advantages in specific areas. It operates 662 self-propelled howitzers compared to India's 100 in this category. In multiple rocket launchers, Pakistan has 600 systems, while India has 264, indicating Pakistan's focus on certain firepower domains. Let's now look at the defense budgets. Military sustainability is closely tied to funding. India allocates about $75 billion annually to defense, while Pakistan's annual defense spending is around $7.64 billion. This investment allows India to expand its personnel, acquire more advanced equipment, and continue modernizing its forces. Pakistan, meanwhile, tries to build a deterrent defense by channeling its limited resources into strategic and high-priority areas. Now, for a comparison of naval power, India has a total of 293 naval assets, including 2 aircraft carriers and 18 submarines. Pakistan has 121 naval platforms in total, with no aircraft carriers and 8 submarines in its inventory. The Pakistan Air Force operates 879 aircraft, including 498 fighter jets. India, by contrast, has 1,116 aircraft, including 542 fighters. While the numbers heavily favor India, military balances are not determined by quantity alone. Geography, speed, doctrine, deterrence capacity, and regional alliances all play a role in shaping outcomes. So where are recent clashes taking place? We are seeing low-intensity skirmishes at various points along the line of control, established in past years. So far, both sides have refrained from escalating attacks. This is where it becomes crucial to understand how India fits into the broader regional equation. In recent years, US support for India has visibly increased. But another notable player stands out: Israel. Israel has become one of India's strongest external partners, particularly in defense. Diplomatic and military ties between the two countries have developed significantly over time. This rapprochement, which began in the early 1990s, has since evolved into multi-billion-dollar arms deals, joint production facilities, and strategic partnerships. During the 1999 Kargil War, Israel supplied India with mortars and missile systems. This marked a turning point in the defense partnership between the two countries. In 2005, India introduced a local production requirement for defense procurements. This policy accelerated investments by Israeli defense giants in India. As of now, the Indian military's inventory includes several Israeli weapons, for example, jointly produced Barak systems, Heron and Hermes 900 drones, and the Tavor assault rifle. So why do Pakistan and India experience periodic clashes every decade? Since the split in 1947 has been marked by some form of conflict. These two neighboring states have gone to war multiple times. Now let's take a look at the history of this major tension. Britain withdrew. The Indian subcontinent was divided into two. One became India, the other Pakistan. But this wasn't a simple withdrawal or the end of colonialism. Just as the borders of some countries in Africa and the Middle East were deliberately drawn, artificially, the British undertook a similar move in Asia. As they withdrew, they left behind a division based on religion. The Muslim-majority areas were given to Pakistan, and the Hindu-majority areas to India. However, Kashmir was excluded from this division. Although 90% of the population in Kashmir was Muslim and wanted to join Pakistan, Kashmir's Hindu prince, Maharaja Hari Singh, chose to join India. The people of Kashmir who opposed this decision revolted. The prince requested help from India to suppress the uprising. India sent troops and occupied the region. Thus, the First War began in 1947. The war ended on January 1st, 1949, through United Nations mediation. A referendum was called for, but India rejected it. It did not withdraw its troops from the region and annexed the territory under its control. In response, Pakistan defined the areas under its control as two autonomous entities, Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. The first war over Kashmir was over, but the issue remained unresolved. In 1965, India and Pakistan faced off again. The struggle for control in Kashmir turned into a full-scale war. In 1971, the war shifted eastward. In East Pakistan, today's Bangladesh, the people revolted. India supported this independence movement. Pakistan responded with airstrikes. But the war was short, and Bangladesh declared its independence. After the war, the 1972 Simla Agreement was signed, establishing today's line of control. Kashmir was effectively divided between the two countries. By the late 1980s, public uprisings began to occur in the region. Assassinations targeted politicians, kidnappings took place, and armed groups were gaining strength. India believed Pakistan was behind these uprisings. According to New Delhi, the revolts were being organized, and militants were being smuggled across the border. India had sent thousands of additional troops to the region. In 1999, border violations occurred in Kargil between the two sides. The violations escalated into 7 weeks of clashes. In 2019, a bombing targeted a police paramilitary unit in Jammu and Kashmir, killing 44 people. New Delhi declared that Pakistan was behind the attacks. In response, India launched an airstrike on Balakot inside Pakistan's borders. The next day, Pakistan announced it had shot down an Indian fighter jet. A pilot was captured and returned a few days later as a gesture of goodwill. As a result, if we look at the recent events, most of the clashes between India and Pakistan so far have taken place along the border. The two sides have engaged in numerous military confrontations, many of which ended with no clear winner. According to some analysts, Modi plans to send a message to the domestic audience with an airstrike like in 2019 and turn it into political gain. However, after each incident, there is growing public pressure for a strong response. For this reason, India's room to maneuver is narrowing. To calm public anger, it may be forced to retaliate, and it could do so by launching air or artillery strikes into Pakistani territory. But if that happens, Pakistan is also likely to respond harshly. On the other hand, the restriction of river water flows is increasingly harming Pakistan. Islamabad may no longer tolerate the damage and might respond militarily. Whether the conflict escalates further depends on the steps both sides take and the scale of any attacks. In fact, the most crucial issue from now on is whether the Kashmir problem will be resolved. In 2019, India repealed Article 370 of the Constitution. This article had granted Kashmir a special status. It could make its own laws and apply different rules for things like property ownership and citizenship. But now, Kashmir has been placed under the authority of the central government. With these moves by the Hindu nationalist ruling party, pressure on Muslims in the region has increased. In other words, as long as the Kashmir issue remains unresolved, it's clear that the India-Pakistan tension will not come to an end.